Welcome everybody to the live entertainment town hall. My name is Patrick Whalen. I'm with Backstage Productions. I'd like to thank all of you for joining. For those of you who are new to the town hall, well, welcome. This is our second one. We have an extremely full agenda today, and so I'm not going to waste a lot of time with my speaking and doing my prelude into the panel discussions. Before we start, remember, if you have a question, go on the YouTube page, go to the very bottom of the page, click on Show More, fill out the jot form, and we'll get it in real time. We'll try and answer every question we get online. We've got a lot of questions, so we'll try and get through as many as possible. Once again, this is not going to be a medical discussion. None of us are doctors. Few of us claim to be doctors. And I'd also ask our panelists and our guests to refrain from any negative political discussions. We're all trying to have a great time and a good panel, and we understand the situation and we'll get through it, but let's try and keep it as positive as possible. Today we're going into a more in-depth look into the future of our industry, the new models that we'll be facing, and some of the new costs that we're going to be facing. We're going to hear from our industry experts and the most up-to-date information as we have it. I would like to also thank Pollstar once again for being our sponsor and an exclusive sponsor at that, and support of our town hall meetings. And with that, I'd like to introduce Ray Waddell. Ray, thank you very much for coming. He's our co-moderator today. How are you doing today, Ray?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be a part of it.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to also introduce our panel today. Today we have co-head of concerts and partner at International Creative Management, ICM, Steve Levine. Steve, welcome and thank you. We also have James Fallows, author and national correspondent at The Atlantic. James has got an outsider's perspective today. We've never ever had somebody that's not in our industry on one of these panels, so this is a big deal for us, and we're very excited to have James. We also have Jake Berry, production manager for U2, AC/DC, and thousands other acts that you've all heard of. Stuart Ross from Red Light Management. Jim Digby from the Event Safety Alliance. Paul Bassman from Ascend Insurance. Michael Strickland from Bandit Lights. Rob Beckham, Artist Management Group. And Rob, thank you for joining us. I know you're very far away. Rutger Jansen from EDC and Insomniac. Ray Waddell, of course, is Pollstar. And RJ Lynn, our director and co-executive producer. So, gentlemen, thank you.
Steve Edelman.
And Steve Edelman. Oh, we missed him. Event Safety Alliance. This has been the curse of Steve Edelman. I'm just going to take a second to apologize. For whatever reason, the gremlins have left Steve out of every single email, and Jim Diggy has caught it every time. Thank you. Thanks, Jim. So our first category is politics and our industry. And we're going to go over to James Fallows, and I'd like to direct a few questions. But James, you actually have a connection to our industry. And if you could just go into a little bit about how COVID-19 has affected your event.
Sure. And thanks so much, Patrick, for having me here. It's a real honor and Ray to join you all. So I've worked for a long time for The Atlantic, which is the oldest magazine in the U.S. It was founded before the Civil War in 1857. And the way it's become a strong magazine in the last 20 years is largely through incorporation of your business. We have a strong print magazine, we have a very strong website, but the events business has been of fundamental importance for everything from cash flow to underwriter deals to connections with leading figures around the world. And so the center part of our magazine business is actually the Aspen Ideas Festival for a week every summer in Aspen. We have some other subsidiary events, probably 24 of them through the year. And all of those have now been either canceled outright or been converted to this kind of a Zoom forum. And so we are reckoning with just basic change in you wouldn't expect a change in your business to affect America's oldest magazine, but we're living through a version of what you're all living through right now too. So I want to give solidarity of that sort. Shall I say anything more about the media right now, or shall I just leave it at that for the moment?
I was going to ask you about that, James. how do you see the government and the media playing a role in our industry and I guess currently and then moving forward?
So I think there are, my standing to speak here is that my house where I'm sitting right now in DC is about, it's less than 1 mile from where Anthony Fauci lives. So we hear the kind of exhaust from the Secret Service vehicles outside his house through the evening. And so that's the only way I know more about this than just reading the paper. But I guess I would make three main points as an outsider to your industry about sort of the political and media ecology of what you'll be dealing with. The first is the profound and ongoing scientific and medical uncertainty and unknowability. Until just a few minutes ago, I was interviewing somebody who'd been central in the response to the Ebola outbreak years ago. And he was saying that it just is almost impossible to know whether at what stage, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 months from now, 3 years from now, there's going to be a different public health landscape. It could be that there are vaccines that accelerate more quickly.
Whoops, I think we lost James. Let's see if he unfreezes. Do we have everybody frozen? No, everybody's good, right?
I'm good.
So
Yeah.
Just,
Oh,
yeah,
there we
the
go.
best part.
our modern world. So this quicker. First, on the medical front, everybody seems to say it is fundamentally unknowable. We don't know whether it's going to be next year, 2 years from now, the end of this year, when there's a basic change in public health, and the pace of news, minute by minute, day by day, is really, really significant. So we have scientific uncertainty that we need to adjust for. I think I'm freezing again.
You're freezing a little bit, but we can hear you still. So
Okay,
please continue.
fine. So you can hear me. That's but it might be better all around.
Yep.
So there's a need for adaptability. The second is the evolving and knife's edge politics of this issue. By that, I mean, over the past couple of years, my wife and I have been sort of putting out the message that national level politics, with all of its polarization and dysfunction, is quite different from most state level politics and most regional and city politics, in that most cities are still functional in their governance, and most states are too. And so I think we saw that in the first couple of months of response to this pandemic, where it was governors of both parties taking the leads, mayors and their officials generally saying, here's what we need to do. The question is whether we can maintain the basic functionality and variability and specificity of local level politics for the foreseeable future, or whether that's going to be distorted by having national level politics kind of bleach into that. We've seen some of that in protests around the country. We've seen some of it of masks becoming a partisan issue. So that would be the second political point. In every way possible that we can keep this a locally focused, state focused, knowledge focused issue, as opposed to one more front in the partisan warfare. I think that will make things better for the industry. And third, again, trying to speak before things freeze up here, the media landscape. It's often the sense that any big industry feels that the media are there sort of waiting for them to screw up, waiting for somebody to do something wrong, waiting for some problem to emerge, waiting for an event to be held, and say, oh, look, you did this, and 3 months later we had these problems. I don't think that the media are spring-loaded for that right now. I think there's very little sort of pre-existing ill will towards your industry. On the contrary, people miss what it is you provide. They would like to be able to get together. They would like to be entertained. They would like to celebrate. And I think as long as whatever you do to open up has the cover or the legitimacy of a mayor or a governor or a federal legislator saying, yes, we think the following steps are prudent, as long as you have these guidelines, whether it's masks or distancings or whatever. I think that the media, they're not looking to make trouble for you as long as there is, you can say, well, the governor told us and we were operating on the governor's guidance, or the CDC told us we're applying CDC standards. So my three main messages: the medical world is fundamentally unknowable, and we all have to exist in that uncertainty. Things could be better than we expect 6 months from now, or they could be worse than they expect. Second, on politics, we want as much as possible, I mean the events business, to stay within the practical minded lee and shelter of governors and mayors, as opposed to becoming one more battlefront on the national level, a political battle. And third, the media, I think you will be okay with the media if you have the color of following official guidelines. And if you do that, if anything goes wrong, the blame will be on the people who produce those guidelines, and not those who in good conscience were following them. So that's my opening pitch.
I couldn't have said it better. I mean, your insight is amazing. You know, we as Stuart and you and I had talked yesterday in our pre-panel call, you know, we were concerned that the media would be sitting on the hillside waiting to have somebody, you know, make an error, and that would push us back further. And you know, it was refreshing to say that no, that's not the case. When you were talking about you know, you were saying that that's not what their goal is or their objective. They want it to be successful as much as you do, but you know, we have to wait in due time. I want to go to a question that we're going to dive into deeper further on in this panel, and that is the panel, or the question on the viral pandemic exclusion and what your thoughts are on that. I mean, this is going to be the hot button topic of the day, and it was yesterday in our pre-panel discussions. I'd like to get your input on that.
Patrick, are we talking about the McConnell bill?
Correct.
Okay.
So let me stipulate that I don't know the details of how this applies in your industry. So of course you all are 100 times more expert. I think this is it's a tricky path for you to navigate. The very fact that this is known as the McConnell bill means that already it's on the grid of national political divisions. And essentially anything that Mitch McConnell is for at this moment is viewed with enormous suspicion by the Democratic majority in the House, and with comparable support by the Republican majority in the Senate. And so there is going to be, I think there's going to be, in ways that have nothing to do with your business, but with lots of other businesses, there's going to be resistance to this provision by people saying, for example, we have this mandate that these underpaid, largely refugee workers have to go back into the slaughterhouses, and they're being made to go back into the slaughterhouses, but then there's an exclusion for their employers. And I think the debate is going to be about industries that have nothing to do with you. Yep. But there's the risk that will spill over towards you. What I was saying, there's a kind of a media insulation, that the media will give you a kind of pandemic exclusion if you're following the rules. If there's any way that you can have what you need for your business be separate from anything known as the McConnell bill, yeah, that will keep you from being as much in the crossfire.
James, could I jump in here, Patrick?
Of course.
James, I've worked daily since the 13th with Tennessee's two senators, Lamar Alexander and Marsha Blackburn, who are both Republican, but they just happen to be our senators. I've worked daily with them since the 13th on passing both the CARES Act and the PPP. Now I'm working with them on cleaning up the Treasury regs that change the intent of the CARES Act, but also I'm working with them on exactly this. And to your point, you're correct about the fact that it carries McConnell's name, but it's already in the political pipeline. And as we both know, the two parties are going for, stimulus 4, stimulus 5, and it's buried in there. They do assure me it's going to take place. It is much bigger than our industry. It's for all industries, but we stand alone in the fact that we are the industry that has 20 to 150,000 people like sports in an arena, and an extraordinarily liability. laying in front of us. So it's being worked on. I've been involved in it for, I guess, 3 weeks now, working with them, trying to help craft the legislation and trying to help get it through. But the sad truth is it's going to be bundled in with everything else. Whereas the revisions we're making to the PPP right now, and I emailed some of you, those were not actually in the legislation. They were in the Treasury regulations. And I'm told the Treasury is getting ready to rewrite the regs to make the 8-week window longer and to make the 75% rule smaller. But that can be done by Treasury as a cleanup. This cannot be done by anybody other than the Congress. And it is a political football. And because it's so broad, I don't know how to get out of it. And let me close by saying I'm a recovering lawyer myself. And of course, 3 weeks ago, the American Trial Lawyers Association jumped in, and I challenge anyone listening to go Google it. And they're already out there with the class action lawsuit ads on the internet and on television. They're just waiting to form the class actions. So all of that's kind of in front of us.
Yeah. So just to respond on that, obviously your contacts with Senators Blackburn and Alexander, they are a million miles closer. I'm closer to Fauci's house, but they're closer to the action on this than I am. And they obviously would trust their judgment. I think from a public point of view, the same Democratic legislators or same trial lawyers who are concerned about the packing houses or the delivery people or the fast food people or whatever, which is the main friction, those same people, they want to go to football games and they want to go to concerts. And I think they're looking for ways to have your industry be reopened. I think if I were betting on the outcome, it would be leverage on this point will give the Democrats in the House, they will get something more they want if they go along with what the so-called McConnell bill in the Senate. If there were any way to have something that was different for all of you from your business, from the packing houses, the other sort of dangerous industries, that would be a godsend, but that may just be impossible at this point.
And I think there's definitely going to be, this could be a 2-day discussion on this particular topic. And I think that you're right. There is going to be some sort of special package or special bill that will cater to more of an industry specific areas. I think that for right now, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We don't know how the edits are going to be. I would imagine that, one of the things is trying to do blanket bills to cover everything sometimes isn't the best and most efficient way to spend our time. So
hey, Patrick, before you move on, can I just ask a kind of follow-up to both James and Michael? Is there a way we as an industry can help those on the Hill distinguish our needs differently from the packing house? Not that the packing house doesn't need it as much as we do. Everyone needs it. Should we be lumped in there? Does that help us move the ball to a better place than being separated out? What's better?
That's what I'm doing daily, Jim. Yeah. Not only that, but for those of you that have been in my circle, I started 3 weeks ago trying to separate us from cruise lines and nightclubs and people that can and will open up 20%, 30%, 40%, because live production's 100% or nothing. We can't make a living with a tiny little crowd. So I've been trying to distinguish the production community en masse from everything else. And to your point, yes, Jim, there needs to be that distinction. Whether we get it or not is the question.
Well, and I would think, what we don't want to do is carve it up so much that we lose a sector. I'm thinking specifically of the Independent Venues Association. They may be small, but they are integral to everything that happens in the future of our business.
Yep.
And if we're not able to include them, then I think that's a miss as well. So if that's the loss we take by coming out of the bill that's with the meat packers, then we stay with the meat packers, I think. Yeah. But if we can't look at entertainment as a whole, perhaps that's a bigger problem.
I'd like to go to Steve Edelman on this really quick, and I know we're kind of jumping around, but this is actually a great topic, and we were going to segue into this later on. So, Steve, if you could speak briefly on this as well.
Sure. And this is the discussion that we had at great length yesterday.
Yes.
The gist is there ought to be both a carrot and a stick. And as I understand the McConnell bill, it currently is mostly carrot, but there's no stick attached. And I think the thing that would be most helpful for at least our industry, which is the industry I know, is in exchange for liability limitations, in other words, protection for employers, there needs to be some requirement that they engage in reasonable safety practices. And whether those safety practices that are codified as reasonable are, the Event Safety Alliance reopening guide or somebody else's practices, the point is, in exchange for legal protection from lawsuits, there needs to be a requirement that the standard for health and safety be raised to a level appropriate to a global pandemic. Giving protection without requiring safety measures, that would be political in a way that I don't think our industry would benefit from.
Well, doesn't it
Yeah.
trickle down too? That's the other thing, that oftentimes that money doesn't trickle down. So can you attach the ability to make sure that everybody is able to benefit from this bill, not just those who own the big companies?
Yeah, Paul Bassman, love to hear from you on this. I know you were on our
Yeah.
call as well, since Steve and Stuart and myself were having this discussion. I think that lasted 40 minutes or so. Love to get your input.
Thanks, Patrick. So I have several thoughts on what we've been talking about here. When it comes to the McConnell bill offering liability protection, and then the concern with worker safety and health, it's still unclear, but hopefully in that bill somewhere, there would open up the doors to at least letting the workers be covered by workers' compensation. It's not exactly clear as to whether workers' comp would cover someone if they're sick from COVID-19, because a lot of state statutes don't allow for cold and flu to be covered by workers' comp. So at least I would hope that the workers would be covered under, if they do offer a liability shield. And a liability shield, I feel, is very important for our industry going forward, because most of the policies going forward will contain an exclusion for coronavirus or communicable disease altogether. So with that exclusion, and I'm talking about on a general liability policy, if you have the exclusion on a general liability policy, any lawsuits, no lawsuits will be covered if you have an exclusion, and that creates all sorts of problems. And Steve Edelman, what you're saying about creating standards for that liability shield is very, very, it's great to do that in a sense, but at the same time, you're still going to open the door to people saying, did you cover the standards? Did you not cover the standards? It does open the door for litigation, which would not be covered by insurance.
Yeah, and
Hey,
we're
Patrick.
going to dive more deep into this further on into our discussion today. I just, since we're following off of James, I want to get back to. I have a few more questions for James, and then we'll get back into our insurance and legal part of our panel a little bit later on. And James, I've got your book here, Our Towns. You flew 100,000 miles across the heart of America with you and your wife in a plane that you flew, correct?
Yes, a Cirrus Cirrus.
And you landed actually in Duluth, which is, I'm from Minneapolis, so I've been up there many times, which is a beautiful place. What I have a question is, we always talk in our industry about California and New York and some of the major cities. The majority of our business are these, for lack of a better word, secondary markets. And they're really the heart of America, and they are the heart of our industry, because without those stops, it makes touring very difficult. So how do you see the heart of America recovering in this time and bringing back? I mean, they don't have sometimes the infrastructure that we do in major cities. They don't have the business resources that we do in major cities. Yeah. How do you see that changing, or how do you see that turning into a positive for them as we go and get through this?
So thanks for asking that. One of the main themes that my wife Deb and I presented after traveling for most of the time from 2013 to 2017 is that while the media attention and economic attention is mainly on LA, New York, DC, Seattle, there's a tremendous internal sort of archipelago of places that are reinventing themselves and coming back. And we saw your kinds of businesses being very important parts of the revitalization of Fresno, for example, where they have the Rogue Festival, and Allentown, PA, and Duluth, and places across Texas, and Burlington, Vermont, and Greenville, South Carolina, et cetera. And so it has been, in the last 2 months, we've been in careful touch with these places, because trying to see how the mainly small and experimental venues, working spaces, performance spaces, restaurants, just anything that gets people together, usually small scale. These have been on the frontier of making Erie or Duluth or, name your city, Wichita, Kansas, making them much more lively places. And they're the ones that are sort of disproportionately threatened right now. And I think that a transpartisan way to make the appeal, transpartisan political way and media way to make the appeal of your industry for legislation you need and other things, is that across the country, people recognize that what you're providing is what places need to be really alive. It's what Eau Claire, Wisconsin needs now with this new performance space, and Sioux Falls with some of their outdoor sports venues. And so I think that we've been trying to be in touch with people and report on ways that smaller venues that were so important to the identity and life of these towns that are, the second to third tier of American cities in size, the way they're trying to keep themselves going now so they can lead a recovery again. So here, I think you find people across all the normal divides in American life all uniting and thinking that what you all are doing is something that's part of what America needs.
I thank you so much, and I wish the best for everybody in our industry, and especially in these second and third markets. And James, I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. You're welcome to stay on the panel, but I know you are in the middle of writing another article and very busy. So if you have to leave us, we completely understand. But once again, thank you so much for coming on. And I recommend our towns. Amazon came in yesterday, so I didn't get a chance. I thought I was going to have it Friday, but I am going to be reading this week. So thank you, James.
Thanks so much. You've taken the crucial step in book ownership of owning it. And it's a real honor to be with all of you. And I'm going to listen here on mute for a while, then leave when I need to go back to my day job. But thank you for letting me join you all.
All right. Thank you, James. So our next topic, we're getting into opening back up. And we're going to go to Steve Levine from ICM, who's taken time out of his very busy schedule today. And Steve, thank you for coming back on. Steve, what are you seeing on your side of the industry right now?
It's all over the place. This is pretty much nuts and bolts, which is, I think, appropriate for this group. Everybody's got hopes and plans and contingencies. I think I've moved 1,000 shows, but we're booked the same shows 3 times and hoping that at one point I'll be right and they'll play. It is all over the place. I think there's a desire to open. Everybody wants the same thing. We're in a great business, just like restaurants. Nobody changed that part of it. It just has to be safe, in my opinion. So it's reminding me of kids dancing at high school. They want to see how close they can get and still be safe and still get away with it.
So are you seeing new shows being booked right now, or are you seeing more rescheduling right now?
I'm seeing both. Those of you who get ticket counts, which is probably everybody, when I saw one that says only 445 days to go till the date plays, gives you some idea of what some of this looks like. I've literally booked some shows into 2022. A lot of the adult contemporary in that kind of world or comedy is willing to go that far out. Much more difficult on the contemporary artists. So it's both. When we first started this, I thought I had a pretty fast start, moved things to the summer, into Q3, into Q4, and now all of that is kind of out the window. At least certainly the summer and in my opinion, probably Q3 and Q4. I don't know. I don't know anything anybody else doesn't have information on, but to see shows this year, unless they're in these limited capacity configurations with all the rules, regulations, and experimentation that goes with that, I don't think we're going to see much, if anything, at all.
I wish you had. I mean, it's sort of not the news we wanted to hear from you, Steve. We wanted to hear that you are booking like crazy and that, you know, Q3, Q4 is going to be slammed. But
well, I am booking a lot, being serious. But it's really I'm not focused on this year. I'm focused on the what ifs of next year. Now, don't get me wrong. I have hundreds of shows still booked for this calendar year.
So as Vegas begins to open, what are you seeing as far as first shows that might be in Vegas?
I don't think anybody knows what they will be specifically. The two biggest hotel chains, Caesars and MGM, are both going to try to open this summer. They say they're opening. They've got big protocols that have been assigned to them. I don't think that means entertainment starts quickly, but I think logic tells us that the smaller shows, and I don't mean audience-wise, but a smaller show, they've called out comedy. I don't think that's any big secret, because it doesn't require the backstage personnel and all that interaction that, say, a Cirque show would. So I think when it gets started, it's going to be smaller needs shows will start.
We have a different experience, Steve, in that everything has pushed, like you said, it pushed from, you know, till May, and then till June, and then till July. Right now, our sort of bigger, wealthier artists have all said, you know what, we're coming back next year. But the mid-level and below artists are all clinging to July, August, September. We have a tour going out July 1. I won't name an artist. They've got a really cool concept, but it's going out July 1. We've got probably 8 to 10 tours that I believe, unless the virus flares up, are going to do something. And they're artists that you would know, but they have an economic need. And sure, I'm friends with several of the artists themselves, and a couple of them have told me if we have to go out and play Montana and Idaho and the places that you would imagine away from Live Nation and AEG, we'll do that. So I've seen that, in that these people need the money. Yeah. And
why not? I mean, if you go to a market or a territory where these secondary or tertiaries are, and you've got, 30 cases across an entire state, let alone a county or a city, and there's people, and they do the necessary precautions, and people are willing to take the risk, and the artist is willing to take the risk and do everything under their power, why shouldn't they be able to earn a living? I mean, I'm happy to play devil's advocate there. There's people who that's their source of income, and if you can go to a grocery store, why not go to a show and take these reasonable precautions? The Event Safety Alliance has some things to follow. There are other groups that there's plenty of. We're not the same country that shut down in March. We're a different country right now, and we have a different level of awareness. And there's also, we're a country of risk takers. So providing some protections get in place, and people are aware of what the risks are, and the people going and the people performing and the people presenting. I think in certain markets they should have the opportunity to play and go. Yeah, and I don't want to dive too deep into the risk yet, because we're going to get to that part. That's going to be a very major chunk of our panel here today. With EDC and Insomniac, I'm going to give this over to Rutger and then also to Jake. What are sort of the future plans for you guys in 2020? Are you guys still thinking that you might be able to have an event this year, or are you going to wait and see what happens in 2021?
You're on mute, Rutger. It's a difficult one, obviously. We rescheduled EDC to October, but we kind of know. Actually, I was in a meeting last week with Steve Edelman regarding the how do we start up again, And we kind of came to a conclusion that it's going to be close to impossible to start up a 175,000 person event. Our biggest disadvantage is that we're great in throwing the biggest festivals in the world. We do have a good side to it, is that the people that come to our events have the least amount of risk in getting this virus. It's like 0.0135% of the people of our target group gets it. So I think there's an opportunity for us to do stuff in several markets, but I don't think it's at the scale that we want to do it. It's going to be way smaller, and how big it is, I don't know yet.
I would imagine just logistically, if social distancing is still, which it probably will be in effect in the future of 2020 and later in the fall, I would imagine that having social distancing for an EDC event is going to be really impossible.
Social distancing would be impossible at any festival. And even if you open up smaller clubs at 500, they're not going to social distance inside. I think this weekend was, for me, a great weekend and a sad weekend. The saddest part is being involved in EDC. It was meant to happen this weekend, and the effort and the magnitude a production director would put into a show, and you could watch it stream live, which is great for the audience and for the people enjoying it. But there was a bit of sadness when you watch a stream event knowing that that's your show and it wasn't as big as you could. The successful parts of the weekend, not in entertainment, I thought, if anybody watched NASCAR yesterday, anybody watched a NASCAR race, I think, even though it is entertainment, that was a giant step yesterday, holding a NASCAR event. First of all, I think they got it 100% right. They did a great job, the way they're looking at it. And yes, no audience, no crowd. And to be perfectly honest, you didn't miss it because it's all about the TV coverage anyway. But the way they approached it, the way they did it, minimized the number of people, like in pit crews, like we would backstage. There's a lot of lessons there. And if it's successful, I can virtually see that people allowing attendance to start up in those big arenas in the seating area, not on the infield, of saying, okay, look, you did a good job. In 3 weeks, you can have 1,000 people. And I think that's the way to look at it. The sad part about this weekend is the German Soccer League opened up, which really affects us more, to empty arenas. And it was abysmal. It was terrible to watch. It was like watching a training session. and that is more in our league, how we're going to get the people in the big arena. Now, if they have a sensible event, maybe they can bring some smaller crowds in. But to me, there was some light shed this weekend with people making great decisions. Now, as an industry in production, we've got to get back on track. We can't force it. And I do believe, listening to all this government bullshit, by the way, I don't understand half of it. I rely on you guys to do that. But we are, and we always have been, the angry stepchild in our business and government. We run our own way. We run our own things. And what we do is unique. We get a lot of people, and we know how to get a lot of people, especially, and I can talk from the Insomniac now, get a lot of people in one place very, very safely. So we can control how they get in. We can do everything, social distance, queue lines, temperatures, spray. Once that masks, gloves, we can do everything. But once they get past the gate, you're lost.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the same as any event. So.
Yeah, Robin Stewart.
That's part of the discussion that we had this week. It's all about educating people. After 9/11, there's so much stuff changed, and everything was different and weird and awful and terrible and whatever. And a couple of years, and actually even months later, people get used to it.
For sure, Rutger. We're going to see temperature checks. We're going to see swab tests when they get good, get it out in 2 or 3 minutes.
It's all about...
It's a bit like when you went to the airport 20 years ago. We can remember that. You get out of the car, You walk through the terminal, you went to your gate, you got on a plane, and then it's slowly more precocious.
We need to make sure that people start behaving themselves. Like they're going to be the secret of our success is them behaving themselves on
Yep,
our.
and I think that is an excellent message. You know, so moving forward. Sorry, Steve Levine, I have a question for you. Moving forward.
Before you ask, I just want to make sure Ray and Michael know I'm not against things starting. I want them as much as anyone. I'm just being realistic from what I'm hearing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So, Steve, we've been hearing rumors of potential door deals, and I want to throw this out to you. You know, what are your thoughts on these so-called door deals that have been bounced around by some different agencies? And then also, I'm going to go to Rob and then Stuart from the management side of this and get your perspective.
Best I can say is it's still evolving. There were some, they weren't knee-jerk reactions, but people tried to get onto this. The two biggest promoting companies, you know, they floated a bunch of ideas at the beginning. None of them were ready to be said yes to. And I don't think that's going to be the way it is just straight out. I think it's evolving. We'll get there to, I think it was Jake's point. If a show gets booked for 1,000 people and we feel the momentum is there, it won't matter what the capacity is. We'll base it on the new expectations and new expenses. And our business is formulaic to a large degree. Costs are going to change. But I don't think it's simply going to go to a no guarantee deal across the board. I don't think that happens.
Rob, your input on this.
Can you guys hear me? There you go.
Yep.
Speaking strictly for Brad Paisley, you know, I think in an industry where we've always said that you can never replicate live music or a concert feel, you know, Sherry Lewin at WME brought this offer a few weeks ago, and they made it all happen. And doing that live stream, which was, I mean, full concert production, full arena amphitheater type show in a sound hall. So, you know, that was one way to be innovative and outside the box. And, you know, for bookings and things like that, we've also done the same thing with Chris Young. But what to me is probably the single most important thing that's happened in country music, particularly, is the Gulf Coast Jam going on sale last week or 2 weeks ago and breaking with the biggest number that it's ever broken with Brad and Luke Bryan and whoever else is on the show. But the idea that, you know, there are tens of thousands or, you know, 10,000 so tickets sold for a Labor Day weekend concert that nobody knew what was going to happen. Was it going to do 500 tickets or was it going to do 5,000 tickets or was it going to sell out? Nobody really knew. So I think the idea of having live music coming back is, you know, for all of us, it's the most amazing thing. It's Labor Day weekend. And Ray was asking that question. Down in Panama City in the Gulf Coast of Florida. And, you know, I think that it's very positive hearing about Las Vegas opening up and hopefully going back to full speed, you know, by July or August. I know it's still a wish, but we're hoping that that's the case. I actually think that maybe the most important thing that's happened in the last couple of days is Walt Disney World in Florida coming back online. And part of the question I was going to ask to, insurance. Sorry, I can't see on my screen. It froze up. Paul. I'm sorry, Paul. It's just really the idea of when people were talking earlier about the liability of the artist going to the show, the fair, if people get it. I think if the Walt Disney model works, or at least gets the ball rolling, of just saying, like, by the way, you're coming to a public place and you're going to have this opportunity, this exists, this virus exists, enter at your own risk, that kind of thing. I think if Walt Disney World opens back up and you see mass crowds, then baseball comes back, then the NBA, then the NHL, then the arenas are full again, and then we go back to concerts. So I'm actually really optimistic, and my partner Bill Simmons and I are really optimistic. But at the same time, we're also being realistic in the sense that the odds of touring the rest of this year are pretty much non-existent.
Yeah, Stuart Ross.
Hello.
You know, you're involved in the touring, and you're also involved in the production side, and You've seen a lot of different things. Same question is the door deals and how. And actually, I'm going to add something to your question, which is we're going to see a lot of new expenses added on to settlements, whether that's the artist or the promoter. First off, with the door deals, how do you see that playing out in the future, if it plays out at all? And then the second is, what are your thoughts on the I guess the settlement expenses as we go into the rest of this year and beyond?
All right, so thanks. I'm putting on my tour accountant hat. I'm like Steve and Rob. It's kind of a wait to see for me. I don't think the venues or promoters have come to terms with what the new procedures are going to be, what the cost of those procedures are going to be. Are they going to absorb it in their rent costs, or is it something that's going to get passed down to show by show? And then the managers and the agents have to make a determination if it's too expensive to do a show at a particular venue. So honestly, I don't know, because you're going to have testing, you're going to have extra cleaning, you're going to have extra crowd control staff if there's social distancing issues going into the bathrooms, entering the venue, entering the theater or the auditorium. I mean, we don't actually know how this is going to play out or what the costs are going to be. And we'll make a decision at that point. As far as door deals, I'm fine with door deals, but there's two sides to,
the deal,
every formula.
Sure.
And we're not going to know until they put them on the table. It's interesting because the theme parks, Rob, you said the theme parks have announced that they're going to open, at least in Florida. I don't know about Disneyland. And I think that's great. Theme parks can say, hey guys, we're opening next weekend. Enjoy. Unfortunately, concerts, as much as, some government leaders would say, yeah, we can have concerts starting on, Labor Day. Doesn't mean we can do concerts starting on Labor Day. We have to plan and market and route and, we need 2 to 3 months, with the exception of superstar talent, to be able to put a show on, which means we have to predict what the climate's going to be out there.
Yeah,
do we really know that right now? I have shows on the books with Steve Levine in October, and we're not moving those at this point until we figure out exactly what's going to happen. And
hey guys, hey, it's Rob again. I agree 100% in the sense of what you're just saying is the idea. We have shows on the rest. I mean, from Chris Young's tour was supposed to start 2 weeks ago, and Brad was supposed to start this last weekend in amphitheaters and arenas. So we're canceling week by week, month by month, and trying to be as quiet as you can, because until there's actually a plan, like you were just saying, rebooking and recanceling and then rebooking and recanceling, it's like over some point in time, you're going to lose that fan who's already bought a ticket. They're going to want their money back at some point. And so, yeah, we totally agree. I hope it starts Labor Day weekend. For everybody who's listening who hates me or hates hearing that, I think that's reality. We might get lucky in August, but the idea of after Labor Day to me makes the most sense. And we're planning whether we're using Bandit Lights or Sound Image or Mood TV or whatever, they're all playing ball with us because they all want to be in the same boat, or they're all in the same boat with all of us. And it's the idea of like when we can start where it makes business sense, financial sense, safety sense, fan sense, all these other parts of it, this will get rolling. And you just don't go kick off a tour next week.
No,
it's just not going to happen like that.
And Jake had brought that up on our last town hall is that, by the time the dates are announced, it's 2 to 3 months to get us up and running and at least have a process and a system.
It is to sell the tickets to get the production rolling, as Michael was saying. we're all sitting there on the edge of the seat going, I got a tour starting next week. We go, no problem. but getting it organized is different. And also, you know, Stuart there talking to everybody the extra expense that's going to get added on. And, you know, and as a vendor like Michael with lighting, with sound, with video, they're going to have to take extra steps in their shop to ensure when they're loading it that it's, you know, whether you can't spray a light, for instance, otherwise you get rain damage, but is there a way that you can make it safe when you come into the venue? And as you say, you know, the Event Safety Alliance is going, we have to make precautions, you know. So you're saying you've got to have social distancing. If you're unloading a truck with a case, you can't do it with people 2 meters apart. They got to be next to each other.
Yep.
Unless you're in Philadelphia. But there's a few people laughing. But so we got to get over those things. And as sure goes, the venue's got an extra cost. I don't know if a venue can absorb it in their rent. It's already pretty low now with the deals everybody strike. I think that production companies, lighting, sound companies, are going to be an extra expense of the new ways they have to go in. And is our shows when they come back, are we going to take 2 days to load them in so we can have less people in a confined space? I think we all need to work it out. But first of all, we have to figure out how we can sell 10,000 seats in a 20,000 seat arena. That's our first job.
It doesn't have to start like that.
No, no.
Pick up a guitar and go play, or do what they tried to do in Fort Smith, that they pulled the rug out from under them, because and they had it. Somebody's going to have to, again, be courageous, do a show, and let it come off in the sky nightfall. It doesn't have to start with a full-blown tour, coast to coast. There are places that they could play right now safely. I'm convinced of it. And so, again, it's baby steps. But somebody's got to go out there and do a show and be allowed to do a show and see if it works. If people are willing to go and willing to play, and everything is in place for it to be safe, somebody's got to be able to do it, or else we'll never start.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Steve, because this is going to be Steve Levine. This will be my last question for you, because I do know that you as well have to go. And this is a great segue. As we're talking about doing these shows, are we headed for a late summer, fall series of parking lot concerts and drive-in raves and concerts and comedy shows?
It looks like people are trying it, and it looks great. I think nobody's saying it's a substitute. Just like streaming, it's not a substitute for what we really want, but I think it's got different aspects to it that are of value. There's some of the artists are making a few dollars, which is some of them, you know, a lot of them really need it. That's great. It might be a fraction, but it's something. It's fan interaction. It's reminding people how much they love concerts. I think it's giving people some hope and reminder that, look, we will figure this out. We will come back at some point. But Ray, this is off track a little bit, but Ray, I had one of my tour auspices come to me about, they said, could you route a tour that avoided the hot spots? And at first I thought it was a really dumb question. I thought about it for a little while, and then I thought, well, it's only kind of dumb. But it seems impractical to really get any traction with any amount of volume of shows by trying to guess where the lowest risk is.
Well, yeah, again, it doesn't have to be a full-blown tour, but it doesn't have to be a full production. It doesn't have to be a full band. There's a lot of people that can play that could go to, say, the Wilma in Missoula, Montana, where there's 0 cases or close to it, and do a show. I mean, again, baby steps. You got to start somewhere. And I know everybody here wants to do shows, but I think everybody's in this mentality. It's 40 dates and 5 buses and 20 trucks or less, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that. They won't let people do anything. And I think that's a little heavy-handed at this point. I think we need to try to start doing some.
Well, I think this will be the last thing I say is I think a lot of the independent theaters, which is not, you know, the arena stadiums you guys are really talking about, theaters are trying desperately to figure out how to do it just like casinos are and say, we have 1,500 people. I think I got offers from the some of the independent producer people, the venues. And I had 2 offers for Playhouse Square in the 3,000 seater. I had one for 3,000 seats, and I had one for 600 seats in the same venue. And people are trying, they're experimenting.
Take the big one.
Yeah.
I said, take the big one. No, look, we all want it to go back. I'm convinced of that. It's just varying levels of coming back, and you don't have to start with a full-blown big tour. You can start small and do. It just takes one show to come off, and then there can be 2 shows and 3 shows, and that's not going to save the business, but it's going to show it can be done.
Yep.
Hey, Ray, isn't the converse of that also true? Is it possible that it just takes one show to go horribly wrong and a whole bunch of people are in a hot spot?
How horribly wrong could it go with 250 people? And if that's the case, you pull back, but you won't know until you try. And then, look, if there's some of these places that I've mentioned are sitting there at 0 or less. Look at Knoxville. And who are they going to spread it to? You can get on a bus. Now everybody's good that's on that bus. They do nothing but get off the bus, go in the venue, play, don't come in contact with anybody, get back on the bus and leave, and with the same people the whole way. You know, that's limiting your risk. And look, there's risk in anything you do. You can start it in a small way and be about as safe as you can be in anything in life.
No, I
Hey,
understand.
Ray, sorry, I got to jump in here. Ray, that logic makes no sense to me, because just because a show goes off okay in Missouri or Missoula or wherever you want to do a small show, if the next show is a catastrophe, then shows will be shut down again. It's not
Our industry shuts down.
Well, precisely. It's not that we do one show and if that goes okay, then we say, okay, it's good. No, every show is a litmus test. Every single show is its own litmus test.
You keep your level high. You don't drop your precautions. You use everything that we know that we've been talking about the last 3 months.
Well, that's right. But the precautions we've been talking about are all on the venue side. You know, our reopening guide, the ESA reopening guide, is all directed to professionals in our industry. So during this discussion, we've been chatting for an hour. We have not talked at all about the other enormous side of this equation, which is patrons have to become compliant.
About that for 2 months solid. This is not the same country that was shut down 2 months ago.
Well, you know, before we get too far down the rabbit hole on this discussion, I would like to step in and say, first off, Steve Levine, I know that we only had you for a brief period of time, and I know that you have to go, and I wanted to thank you for your participation. You're welcome to stay and observe. But I also, since we're kind of segueing into this, I want to talk about the new changes for 2020, and this is going to get into the insurance and the liability and we're going to tie it in with the ESA. Because this is, you know, a very, very crucial point in our industry where if we do this wrong and we screw this up, we're 20 steps behind than if we have a plan and we walk in correctly. Ray, I agree with you 100% that we need to do shows, 100%.
Well,
but I also agree with Steve and Jim Digby and everybody else about being careful and conscious of the catastrophe that we could perhaps walk into by trying to do something incorrectly, too fast, not with enough planning. I want to work. I would love to never do these again, these town halls, because we're too busy working. That's what I would love. But the fact is, I want to go ahead.
Say, okay, we're good. Everybody back to normal. That's not at all what I said. You know what? And if that works, you follow those protocols for the next show. You don't open the floodgates if one show comes off.
No, we never said that. But what I wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure that we're all, you know, I understand where you're coming from, is that shows are going to happen, but they're going to happen on a smaller scale. But we also are still trying to figure this out as an industry. And the ESA has been working diligently on this. And I know all of us, as far as industry professionals, have been working on this. So, you know, when we talk about the new future, we touched on the viral pandemic exclusion, so I'm not going to go into that, but we're going to talk about how the risk management has changed, how the cancellation policies are going to change. What will the force majeure policies be like? So I'm going to turn this over to Steve and Paul for a few minutes. And I want to jump back into this discussion with you, Ray, on doing these shows, and that we're not the same country as we were before, 100%. I agree with that. We are definitely not the same country. We're a country now that has got to build consumer confidence to get their asses back into the arenas and back into the theaters. Right now, people are terrified. So,
Patrick, I
Thank you all for,
Good.
by the way, thank you.
thanks, Steve.
I could argue that Vegas might be a great test bed for us. And, you know, Steve, you know, is the guy for Vegas. But, you know, that's a market that has very small to very large venues, that has enough staff to be able to work through any procedures that, you know, the government and we as an industry deem appropriate. The problem, of course, is Las Vegas a hot spot? Well, what it is right now versus what it is on a weekend where the entire population changes every 2.5 days is an unknown. But I could see that an earlier opening in Vegas. I don't know. Mr. Levine, what do you think?
Well, it gives you a chance to experiment in the way that we're all talking about. It is a big city. People come and go all the time, but to go to the other spectrum, Ray, from the safest in Montana to, in theory, one of the unsafest with rotating population, if they think that 25% capacity is the experiment, they have the venues to try it. If they think they have to eat some costs of extra cleaning and protocols, they'll be the first ones to do it, probably because gaming is their main business, and they'll give up the buffet. But they're not going to give up. You know, gaming's what it's all about. So it could be the place to where some experimentation takes.
Well, if it's people coming in from out of town, theoretically, you won't even be able to get on the plane to go there, right? Or
they can try
all the protocols we talked about. I don't see any of it anywhere. Nobody wants anybody to get sick. I believe we would all agree on that.
Yep.
And you know, yes, the ESA has protocols. There's a lot of. We've been working diligently. A lot of people have come up with a lot of protocols. You put them all together. There's best practices, and the consumers pleased. How long have they been here in 6 feet? Wash your hands. Everything else about that, to the extreme. So look, I think sooner or later you're going to have to take a chance. And I think if these people that have opened up, where are the spikes? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here because nobody really seems to be talking much about doing any shows until September. And maybe that's the case. Again, nobody wants to get anybody sick. But at some point, we got to have something. And comedy may be the place, or an acoustic guitar.
Well, it's all a risk, no matter how you cut it.
Risky business, right? It's built on risk.
Well, no, but it is.
Right. There's one thing that we haven't talked about that needs to be recognized. I think everybody on this phone call is going to have an income in 6 months. There's a line, whether it's venues or performers or production people, there is a line. And there are the companies, the people, the entities above the line that can go 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, and still be around. But there's a much bigger segment of our industry that, in my opinion, and I have spent the last 9 weeks working on this, in 4 to 8 weeks, companies and people are bankrupt. So it's one thing to take a highbrow approach and say, no, just wait, no, just wait. I sat on another panel last week, and 3 people on the panel were already there. One gentleman was in tears. He's already there. So what do you tell those companies, those peoples, and those entities that can't survive? And we've got to take those people into consideration, because there's a lot of them.
And the bands and the bus drivers and
everybody.
it's easy to sit it out when you're the Rolling Stones, unless, sooner or later that clock's going to run out, but I don't see it. But there's a lot of people who don't know what they're going to eat next week, and that's their whole living.
Yep.
A ton.
Well,
Jake, you know them all. You know a lot of them. So do I. I mean,
Yeah.
they're there now.
so I'd like to
Can I say just one thing,
of
Patrick?
course, yes.
We talk about opening up, we all want to do. Everybody's looking here. Do we have to look at putting bans in places like New Zealand to start, where they're way ahead of us? Australia, Iceland, and places like that, where they're opening up sooner, and use that as a testing ground. The other thing is, do we tour these places, I should agree, and you use the same set of production, so the bands coming in are bringing minimal risk and minimal equipment, and the same is there everywhere. I mean, that's an idea that's been floating around as well. I mean, like Patrick, like Michael said, we're waiting it out, and like Ray said, we're waiting out. But you're right. Somewhere, somebody's got to be first. And I just think after this weekend, with the first major event live on TV being a NASCAR race, even though it's not entertainment, it's a hell of a start, because they do the same as we do. They pick up a load of people and they move it from city to city. And look what they've done. They had a race Sunday, a day off today, a race Tuesday of another series, and then they do a second race at the same venue. Great idea. And then Rob bringing up Disney Open. Look, if Disney Open, there'll be so many. The ticket will be this big because there'll be so many exclusions and non-liabilities, Yep. But you're right. And if they can open up, it's a tried and trusted name, then we can follow very quickly. We all want to open up, but if something happens,
We're shut back down.
We're going back 20 steps. So and nobody's right and nobody's wrong. We have to start. There may be a middle ground. Somebody says we should start there. Somebody says we should start there. Maybe there's a middle ground. Nobody knows. I think we have to wait it out for, look, we had a meeting 3 weeks. The end of May, we'll know what's going on. What do we know different? Nothing. So we're going to wait till June.
Yeah.
The difference between this call and the last call is people are on the edge now, and they didn't know they were on the edge the last time we did this.
True.
Yeah, very true.
It's sad people on their edge. We've all got to do our bit to help out the people on the edge. Ray will know, he's helped me out feeding local stagehands with a thing like Musically Fed, trying to get that locally. Just trying to keep the people that we need when we come back. And unfortunately, when we have crisis, somebody always suffers, and we're all going to know somebody that's lost everything. Yeah. And that's sad. But we all don't want to lose everything because we're too soon. I'd like to work tomorrow, but I can't work tomorrow because it would take me 2 weeks to get in training to go back working 12 hours a day, because I don't think I could do it right now, with all this stuff. So we all want to work. I think we all want to work. We all want to do the right thing. We all want to be safe.
Right. Before we go any further, I just want to interject one thing. If you guys want to ask a question, please fill out the jot form at the bottom of the Show More part on the YouTube channel. We're getting some more questions in, but I do want to have an opportunity, if you guys have questions, that you can submit them. Also, right now, I want to talk and switch gears for just a little bit. Let's talk about the insurance side of our new world and our new industry here in going in 2020. And also, we all have policies that are going to start renewing in 2020 and 2021. And I have a feeling we're in for a huge sticker shock. Paul, would that be a correct assumption?
Yeah, sorry to be the fun police here on this call, but yeah, I've talked to several underwriters that specialize in the entertainment space, and unfortunately, due to just massive losses in the market, the entertainment space has taken big losses on Broadway. TV and film production insurance have been hundreds of millions of dollars of losses. So those losses are going to be unfortunately passed on to the entertainment space. But I'm being told in the neighborhood of 25, even 50% increases in premiums going forward.
So Rutger, how are you guys going to handle an insurance increase, is that going to get passed on to the ticket buyer, or is that something that you guys have had a discussion as of yet?
Well, historically, we don't charge our fans for any increases like that. Same goes for the increases of keeping the venue clean or all those precautions that we need to take. We also don't know how the fan is coming out of this, right? Do they have money to spend? Can they? I mean, they still need to afford those tickets. I think they can. They barely can when they come out of this, let alone that we increase those prices. I think we need to be way more creative than think, hey, any increase in cost, we just push to the fan.
And Rutger, while I've got you on with the force majeure contracts, are you guys changing the way you're contracting your artists? And then I'm going to toss that back over to Steve Edelman and answer that question. But I'm interested from your perspective. Have you guys changed how you do deposits and how you do?
We didn't change it yet, but we're in talks with all the artists. Yes.
And has that been receptive?
Yes.
So okay.
We're talking. We're talking. It's definitely not a no. We're definitely talking, and they understand that if they charge us $100,000 for playing a set, that they have less risk than we do, and they need to start taking part of that risk.
Steve, from a contractual standpoint, how are you changing your contracts or your agreements with people?
There will be new risks to contractually allocate, but I'm not changing my force majeure provisions at all. Force majeure is a really simple concept. It's not either of the parties' fault, and the contract performance has become either completely impossible or what's called commercially impracticable. Basically, you just can't. That doesn't change. There's no reason to change that language. And so I'm with Rutger on this. There are things that the law allows you to do, which a lot of times are not a good idea in commercial practice. And so, there will be costs that one could theoretically pass downstream, but it may not be a good idea to do that because you drive patrons away. It's the same thing with waivers of liability that we talked about before. It is certainly possible that any patron before they come into a show is given a waiver to sign saying, I absolve the venue operator of all legal responsibility for any harm whatsoever. You can do that. And maybe for Disney, because they're such a brand, they'll get away with it. But for smaller venues that people can easily make a different choice and still have their entertainment itch scratched, waivers of liability can drive away a lot of patrons at a time when you can't afford to drive away any. So I guess my overall answer is, don't get hung up on what the law allows you to do right now. Focus on what you need to do in order to economically survive this situation. We are all in this together. And to the extent that you can partner even with your vendors and contractors and subcontractors, that's the ticket that's actually going to get you through this.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I had a question for Paul. The event policies that you're seeing right now, how are cancellations going to happen going forward?
So again, we talked about the rate increases. I've seen rate increases already on the event cancellation side, because that's where a humongous amount of losses have occurred. I mean, I'm talking in the billions of dollars on the event cancellation side. And then, going forward on both liability and on cancellation, there will be, for the most part, maybe not every single carrier, and I'm definitely going to be looking for the carriers that don't do this, but most of the carriers will be adding communicable disease or COVID-19 exclusions to their policies. I did talk to one of my entertainment underwriters today, and they're not planning on adding an exclusion yet. So they may be getting a lot of business going forward. But we'll see what happens there.
Didn't we have the same problem after 9/11?
Yes.
And didn't all the insurances and all the underwriters work together in creating a big fund that if they need to pay for something, it will come out of that fund, which would be easier on the premiums.
I have read about that. There are rumors that there is some sort of, instead of terrorism, you have TRIA, there would be some sort of a pandemic TRIA fund that everyone pays into and then it would pay out. But it's still it's such a big pool of people that are impacted by a pandemic all at one time that it sort of flies in the face of what insurance is about, which is gathering money from lots of people and paying a few people for losses, where a pandemic just pays everybody, and you can't raise enough money to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that we've got so many unknowns right now from a contractual standpoint. I mean, Rob, what have you seen so far as any changes contractually with your artists?
Oh gosh. You know, it is literally all over the place. We're fortunate in one sense that that we haven't had to lay anybody off or furlough, but at the same time, we're also just trying to figure it out as we're going. I think especially with our artists, our bigger artists having Live Nation tours, you know, as a company, I think Live Nation is trying to figure out what they're going to do. Obviously, we're going to be good partners, as good as we can be, but at the same time, we represent the artists and not Live Nation. So, man, that's a hard thing there's so many different things floating out there. The agents have brought back all kinds of different offers. Again, I talked about the Bud Light thing that Brad did a couple nights ago, is that where there is the non-touring side of it, non-live part of it for a second, there's these other new opportunities that are presenting themselves. So we're trying to be optimistic, and I know you want this to be an optimistic phone call. I mean, a Zoom. But I got to tell you, I just sent you and Ray a text a second ago.
Yep.
So the governors of New York and California just said that pro sports will start the first week of June. So everybody who's on this phone call or this Zoom call now, all of a sudden it's like going, wait a second, what? The two places where the hottest spots in the world to make happen just said, by the way, pro sports can return June 1st.
That is fantastic.
I think that there's all kinds of optimism to look for. And to me, I think that, you know, it was a world of doom and gloom the last 8, 9, 10 weeks. I actually think it's going to turn itself around, and I think it's going to happen a lot faster than most people say. So Jake and Mike Strickland and you guys get ready to go, baby.
Rob, to your point, in my weird life, I'm an NCAA guy, live and breathe inside NCAA football through my role over at the University of Tennessee in the athletics board. A friend of mine owns a pro football team. So I've lived, worked, and talked to these people nonstop. I'm kind of involved, certainly, in the NCAA piece. And right now, NFL starts September 10th. NCAA starts September 2nd. The plan right now is to have fans in the stands. Now, that doesn't mean it can't change, but that's the plan right now. And they have two alternative plans, both the NFL and the NCAA. One of them is to completely scrap, if you will, the season ticket holders and tell them, okay, you've got your tickets next year, and then go back to the stadiums and start and go down the pecking order 1 to 1,000 and say, okay, Bob, you're ticket holder number 1 because you gave the most money. You normally get 8 tickets, now you get 4, and then get social distancing.
So reducing the ticket.
So they've got 3 different plans to make it work. One's with the socially distanced plan, one is with the full stadium, and of course one is with nothing at all. But if I had to bet, Rob, because again I'm inside baseball here, this is going to happen. And NASCAR, again, they're a client and friends, and Bruton Smith and Marcus Smith and Jerry Caldwell are all friends of mine. I was on the phone Saturday with them for an hour before the race, and they've actually got, you know, they've got 2 races in Charlotte in 2 weeks, and then they actually hope to have fans in the stands by late June. That is their plan, and they have municipalities cooperating with them, asking them to put fans in the stands because the municipalities want what? The tax revenue.
Yep.
So you're seeing that social group think change, to your point, Rob.
Michael, thank you for segueing into my next one, which is now we're about to reopen, and we are talking. This whole last 2 weeks has been the ESA reopening guide, and I'm going to turn this over to Steve and Jim Digby. You know, I think we've all been dying to see this, and why don't you guys briefly talk about the reopening guide and the plan, and And we'll kind of open it up to the whole panel for other questions.
Sure, I'll start, and Jim, please jump in. So the Event Safety Alliance reopening guide is intended to, sort of fill the vacuum of guidance. It is most definitely not a best practices guide. That is a wrong term that sets the bar too high. Rather, we identify the reasonably foreseeable risks of opening during a global pandemic, and then we identify lots of options for people to consider so that, if there is a way of opening without getting a lot of people infected, there are options that they can choose from based on the size of their venue and their demographic and where they are in the country, which means where they are in the spectrum of contagion. So we basically just tried to go as granular as we could, and none of us are that smart. Certainly I'm not, but we had 300 of our smartest friends contributing, so it is a crowdsourced document, and that helped wash out some of the ideas that were either not so great or just not so great right now. And so it's 29 pages of pretty granular suggestions, getting into the details, because yeah, we all want to reopen, but that doesn't make the virus any less contagious. So the things that will make the virus less likely to hurt or kill people involve getting into the details, where in this case, the devil lies. So that's what the reopening guide does. We get very deep into the details of how do you actually reopen a physical space during a global pandemic.
Jim, with I know you've been so ingrained in this as well. I mean, what do you think the two biggest takeaways when you guys started working on the reopening guide were?
Well, I want to be just like everybody else. I want to be the optimist on the group, and I want to make sure that the optimists who are going to move forward and be the test beds for this have unified, researched, meaningful, measurable information to move forward with, right? So that people aren't just simply making up their own rules on behalf of an entire industry and potentially taking us down. So the other part of that is true too. We're already spiraling down. So if we're going to make the decision to go and test the market and see if we can play in places where there is less risk, let's do it from something that we all agree on. Let's do it from a place that we all agree on, is it gives us the safest opportunity to succeed. That's all we're trying to do. And we're trying to couple that with anybody else who's out there doing good work, and making sure that we get the feedback so we know what's working well and what's not working and needs to be adjusted. But I, like everybody else in this call, want to see us go forward. I just don't want anybody making mistakes on behalf of my income, which now there is none, and of anyone else's income out there, so that we can all get back to work sooner.
So I have a question. Have any of the federal, state, and local governments reached out and said that they were going to use that as the template for reopening? Or has this been presented out further than just internally with within our industry? Or
Steve?
Yes. So we can track the number of people who downloaded the reopening guide from our website directly. We've got more than 13,000 downloads just that we can track ourselves. We figure it's roughly 3 times that already. We've got offers to translate it into 4 foreign languages. We've spoken with municipal officials in a number of states. None have put it quite the way you just did, Patrick, saying, we're going to adopt your reopening guide as our official state guidance. But we know that they are looking at the guidance that we offer. And frankly, legislators don't have to go as granular as we do operationally. They just need to know that guidance like the reopening guide exists so that it won't be completely inconsistent with their 4-phase plan. They don't need to turn the reopening guide into law. They just have to know that there is a process. So when they do pass a law, it makes some sense.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead. Sorry. It seems like that there's been a delay or lack of interest in our industry from a government standpoint, and I understand they have better things to do right now than worry about making sure that we're all working. But I think as we go forward, my concern is that they're going to come out with their own set of rules or their own guidelines that may not be, I would say, counteract what you guys have put together. Is that a concern of yours as well, or have you seen zero input from them as of right now?
Sorry, Jim, I'm answering all these questions. I'm not concerned about it because we actually are getting feedback from government entities. And let me take this opportunity to give a shout out to the folks who are actually doing the lobbying on behalf of our industry, which right now is NIVA, it's the National Independent Venues Association, and their whole purpose is to get some federal money to support our industry. Mr. Strickland was talking about this earlier, and Michael, the good news is NIVA is doing the bidding for us, all of us collectively, so that we can survive this economic catastrophe while we work on dealing with the health issues. So am I concerned about legislators doing what legislators do? Yeah, always. That's kind of my baseline. But I haven't seen them trying to create rules that bind us that are contrary to at least what ESA has already come up with. So far, so good there.
And I don't think that they will, Patrick. If you remember 2011 Indiana, it's the genesis of the ESA.
Yeah.
And it was because Governor Daniels was getting ready to enact some really awful legislation that would have hurt our industry. We got a meeting with he and his team and took the experts up there and said, look, the industry will handle this. Just give us a little bit of time. The industry will come back to you with reasonable suggestions, and we'll take care of it. I don't think we want government regulating in that way or prescribing in that way to the entertainment industry. That's why we're doing it.
No, I hope that they take your book and your reopening guide and use that as the template. That would be ideal. I'd like to go over to Rutger for promoting now. I mean, and this is also going to go to Rob. How are you guys promoting differently when we come back to work or when we go back to the shows? Are you changing the way you're going to go after your attendees, or is EDC one of those where it's just so resilient that it's not going to really, you don't have to change your strategies on the promotion side?
Well, yeah, we didn't have to promote as much in the last couple of years. EDC would sell out anyways, but again, I think what is super important is to educate our fans. What do we expect from them once they come on site? What do they like? How do they need to behave? They can ruin it for us if we don't do it right. We need them to fully jump in, so I think communication with the fans is very important if it comes to safety, and what they can expect on site and what we expect in return.
Rob, for your artists, are they wanting to change any of the way that they're promoting their shows or any kind of message that they're wanting to send out as a precursor before they start playing?
I think it's a couple different answers. One being that their sense of normalcy, they just want to get back to normal and doing those kind of normal things. You get on a bus on Thursday, you do your shows, you come home on Sunday, and the machine gets back up into rolling. As far as the actual promotion, really the only one that I can tell you about, because we've had so many all the shows that were actually on sale got canceled, instead of postponing them, they just got canceled. So there was no real promotion happening. So that festival that's going to happen in Panama City over Labor Day weekend really is the first big promotion to come out. And again, I'm only speaking the country world and not the rest of these other genres, but the idea being like, if you know the Gulf Coast and the Panhandle of Florida, it's a bunch of rednecks who want to go out and drink beer and see some country music. So the idea being, if it works, like we were talking, Paul and I were just going back and forth on a text, like it's the biggest on sale they've ever had. So the idea being that people are really cooped up and ready to go. We have to be responsible, we have to be thoughtful, and we have to use safety as our guideline of what this is going to be and being doing. So I've been tracking this New York and California governors reopening their states, and it's fascinating to me that the governor of California, a week or 2 weeks ago, said it's going to be 3 more months of California being shut down. Well, you can't have California shut down when you have to me, it's like, I'm trying to be, again, that glass half full and optimistic here, is that I want us to get back to work. Brad Paisley, Chris Young, and Peyton and Cameron, all these guys want to get back to work on our roster who had full schedules and we're really going to set the bar high for their touring year. It's the idea that it's really out of our control until these states and governments start opening up these venues, whether it's a 50-person club, an outdoor small amphitheater, 1,500 people, a small arena, a NASCAR race, a football stadium. Garth's doing his stadium shows, and I know they've moved him around, but I can promise you, when he actually sets that first date, and it actually happens, that will be pandemonium in a great, glorious, happy way. Not like, oh God, there's 60,000 people in the stadium. I know Mike's going, please, Garth, go back to work. But the idea being like, we're optimistic, and I think look, we have to be responsible and thoughtful to these fans. They've bought in, and these artists have spent years and decades making these fans, and where they trust them and believe in them and want to come to their shows. But at the same time, I just feel like this is all going to happen, and it's going to take care of itself. I really do.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So at this point, I would like to have an open forum. If there's any sort of statements or other thoughts that you guys want to talk about before we go into the questions with Ray. And once again, if you want to submit a question, please click show more at the very bottom and fill out the chat form, and we'll try and get to them as fast as we can. But I'm going to open it up to the panelists. Is there anything else that you guys want to add before we go into questions? Michael.
Patrick, if I could jump in, and jumping back to that previous conversation,
of course, about
the legislation and ESA and all of that, that's part of what I've been doing since the 13th. And the federal guidelines are out. They're under the CDC website. States have come out with guidelines. Municipalities have come out with guidelines. And at the end of the day, and let's go back to NASCAR. NASCAR is going to May 27th, I believe, race in Bristol. Well, they work hand in hand, hand in glove with the Sullivan County government and the Sullivan County Health Department, and that's their model. Now, that's modeled after the state's model, which is modeled after the federal model, and that's what we're seeing all along the way. Is there is an overarching 30,000-foot view federal thing that feeds down to the state, that feeds down to the local. So that's the environment that we're going to live in. And Jim, you sent me a couple of foreign documents that you had picked up, and they're all kind of the same, plus or minus 10%. But as we move forward and how we claw out of this, I found a quote from somebody 2 weeks ago, and I love it. We're the biggest industry talking about production that no one even knows exists, because I ended up on the phone the 15th of March with Lamar Alexander. Well, he had Steve Mnuchin with him. So we end up talking, and he puts the phone on speaker, and the first thing that they said to me was, well, surely you're getting paid, because all of our tours canceled the 12th and the 13th, and I'm sure yours did too. And I said, no, we're not getting paid. And he said, well, surely you have contracts. And I laughed and said, yeah. And he said, well, surely they're going to honor your contracts and you're going to be paid for the next several months. And I said, no, we're not. Number one, there's force majeure. And number two, it just doesn't work that way. And Mnuchin thought a second and then said, what a stupid business. but they now understand the reality of who we are and what we do and why it works. And as I've said in other things like this, live entertainment's the caboose of the recovery train. And we're going to come back last. And my job since the 13th up till today, and I've been sending some of you emails, we got to keep pushing them and keep pushing them. Got to go through our political leaders. You've got to email your state and local and federal leaders, and know that when we come back, we will come back. And I urge everybody on this call and listening, and everybody in the world, talk in 2-week segments. Pat Summitt said you can only coach basketball in 2-minute segments. Talk in 2-week segments, because when a political leader or any of us goes out on the record and says there won't be shows till next year, you rip the hope and the heart out of everybody. And one of the leaders in Nashville a month ago said that. So there'll be no shows in Nashville. My phone rang off the hook, because all people know is what they see on television. The guy or gal on TV is a god. And when they hear that, they go into depression. Let's talk 2 weeks at a time. I sent all of you a new medicine that just came out today that caused the stock market to go up 900 points. There's a lot of faith in this medicine. It could be crap. I don't know. But the point is, tomorrow we could find a cure. So let's talk 2 weeks at a time, and don't rip people's hearts out.
Michael, that was beautifully spoken. Thank you.
Rob, I'm so glad you brought up the Pepsi Gulf Coast Jams. I have to say that I'm thrilled that they're moving forward with it, with such a great lineup. And I just had a text back and forth with Mark Sheldon, who's the mayor of Panama City Beach and a producer of the festival. And he wanted to say that we're excited with the biggest sales we've had in our history. We're looking forward to record crowds in a safe environment. It's 5 months away. Now, in 5 months, if this pandemic is blown up again or we have a resurgence, they won't be able to have the show. But 5 months is a long time, and a lot can happen in 5 months. So I commend them for at least putting it on the board and trying to move forward. And then we have 5 months to figure out how to do it. But you don't cancel a festival because they might have bad weather in that time frame. You just do it. And if you have bad weather, you cancel it. I mean, that's similar situation here. So I have to commend them for that. And again, Rob, thanks for bringing them up, because I'm beyond thrilled that they're doing it.
Well, we have to keep these dates as much as we can, and at least get something on the books so we get some confidence back with the general public and get them back into our seats. At this time, I'd like to go over to Ray. And Ray, you've got a couple of questions, I think 3 or 4. Do you want to read those, and then you can direct them to the members of the panel? And then when we do that, we'll finish up with our closing marks from each person.
Yeah, one of our astute viewers pointed out that Woodstock 69 was held during a pandemic, and we made it. Anyway, one of the questions, will the panel talk about how we've kind of touched on it, but some of the ways of coming at this would be that we're hearing about that are working or could work or are worth trying, like drive-in shows, low capacity shows, and somebody questions, is that worth the effort? And are we irresponsible to force the issue? Anybody want to take that on? I think some of it would say yes, and some of us would say you got to start somewhere, like me. So, but even economically, is it worth the issue to do a lower capacity show if you're, say, a Brad Paisley who's accustomed to a certain amount of revenue to play?
Well, I'll say this. I think that we've had conversations, and the idea of, I'm trying to be politically correct here by this answer, so I'm thinking before I actually say it. But there have been all kinds of conversations that have come back and forth about lower guarantees, lower capacities. I mean, look, and I'm not taking, if it's U2 or Garth Brooks and they want to go play clubs, then so be it. But the idea for my individual artists and the artists that we work with, the brand new acts who are playing clubs and fairs and casinos, we would love to get them back on the road. They want to play. They have a mechanism and a machine that they've built to be able to provide for their team and their people and crews and things like that. The bigger stars who have had lots of success and for years, who can afford to sit out and let things happen. Outside of the country genre, sitting out a year or two in rock and pop and urban is really not that uncommon, right? In country music, the superstars tend to tour almost every year, and how they tour and why they tour. So it's just a little bit different of what it ends up being. I don't think it's irresponsible, and again, I go back to the only thing that I can go to is the Gulf Coast Jam, is that people are wanting entertainment. I also think that, you know, there's sometimes we misconstrue our fans in the sense of that we're sitting here saying like our fans are we being irresponsible and putting them in a venue and they can get sick. Well, you know what? If they don't want to go to a concert, don't go. You know, if you have an underlying health problem, don't go. If you don't want to go to a football game, a baseball game, a soccer match, a hockey game, whatever it ends up being, if you feel unhealthy or you feel uncomfortable going, you don't need to go. So, I mean, there's a common sense part of this that comes into play also, but I don't think it's being irresponsible. And I think every artist, every promoter, every venue, every manager, everybody along that road is all going to have a difference of opinion on how to do this and why to do it and where to do it. It's ultimately going to come down to the artist being the CEO of their company and saying, hey, you know what, we're going to go tour or we're not going to tour. And that's really ultimately what it's going to come down to.
Rob, any word from the labels if they're going to start releasing a little bit of that tour support money that used to be so good back in the day?
Well, I think that, and again, I'm only speaking in the country genre. Country genre for streaming over the course of this event right now is up 14% across the board. You know, and again, in other worlds, that's not a big deal, but it's really the only one who's significantly up. The only part that's bad about that is that it would be hard to go and get tour support, even if you could get it, because I actually think the labels have actually come out really well in this, is the idea that, you know, if you can't, you know, if you use Peyton Smith as an example, he was on a radio tour. It was going to be the opening act for Chris Young's tour. And he has done everything right, and his single is slowly climbing up the charts. But you can't do radio station visits. You know, you can't get in a van and drive and play a club and support what you're trying to do. Yeah. So the idea is, like, as much as we want to, we have to sit just back and wait for a second. So I think that the tour support will be there wholeheartedly, because I think they've actually done very, very well in this.
All right, Ray.
Another question, which is kind of what I touched on a little bit about the group that got on the bus, went into the venue, got off the venue. The question is, would touring groups respect a group isolation bubble, stay together as a group so possible infection will be limited to that group? Because they're the ones going from city to city and conceivably be the biggest spreaders if they did not respect the isolation. And likewise, would they allow a production crew to monitor that isolation? Or I guess the same would apply to the production guys. Jake, I think the tour would stay together and be isolated and limit spreading. This came from from one of the viewers.
I believe so. I believe that there's a will to get back to work, and when we get back to work, as we say, the landscape has changed. And somebody on another call told me, you know, people aren't going to get on buses, you know, and they're going to fly to gigs. I have to tell you, you want to get on a plane, unless, of course, you can afford a charter. You want to get on a plane and sit in a seat that you don't know where somebody's been in. Yep. Or do you want to get on a tour bus? Look, maybe you have to maximize the number of people. If you have a 12 sleeper, put 8 on it, which then goes in the cost of expensive running the show. But then you know those same 8 people. You know where they sit, you know where they sleep, and they're your people. And I think everybody will be open to testing. Everybody's going to moan about it, but it's the new way. Everybody's open to testing and temperature taking. And I strongly believe that bus companies, when they go back on the road, if you have more than 4 buses, need to add 1 person whose job is to keep the buses sanitized in a clean way until we get over this. So, and will people stick together and respect the rules? Yeah, look, we all moaned when we had to go through security detectors after terrorist attacks. We moaned, and we had our bag searched. Did we do it? Yes, we did. So I think touring people, as Michael said, will be anxious and desperate to get back to work, because we're missing the most, financial parts of the year right now. So, and also I agree in the 2-week segments, think in 2 weeks. I think there's not going to be an answer in 2 weeks, but we're all working towards it. We all want the same goal. We all want to tour. We all want to bring music back. And you have to remember, entertainment survived 2 world wars. It'll survive a pandemic.
Jake, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
You had when you and I did an interview a while back, and you said sometimes it was when we would talk to promoters, I'd say or to the when you start a tour, you'd say we need to add another truck, and we'll save money on stagehand labor, and we'll flat pack the truck versus stacking them, and just trying to get the cost of an additional truck and the savings that it would bring. Do you see us adding tour buses to bring more distancing, and meaning that if there was a 4-bus tour, now it's an 8-bus tour or a 6-bus tour, so there's less people on each coach?
I think, first of all, if you try to tell somebody like Stuart Ross that 23 trucks are cheaper than 22, he'd tell you you're an idiot. So, because it doesn't work. But as you know, for production, sometimes it is. Look, it's quite possible that, in the to start with, it's all a start, like Raider. We have to make a start, and then we can work from there. Do I think there'll be slightly more trucks on a tour because everybody's concerned about how many truck loaders get in a truck? Highly possible. Is everybody concerned how many people's on a bus? I think it's possible, but it all goes back to the desire and wanting to work. I'm sure it's going to be a financial burden for the artist. It's about time they maybe took less money and looked after, not looked after, a lot of them do, but to make sure that we get those extra facilities to make sure their crew's safe.
Yep.
And I do really think that people will respect being tested. I do think, look, we'll whine, we'll moan, and then we'll get over it and we'll move on. And, whether it's a small club, you have to apply the same principles, or a large arena. And as Michael pointed out, and he said, look, NASCAR made a start yesterday. No people, successful. The way they do it. In 2 weeks, they're going to try to put some people in the stands. That's a major step. Disney Open, major steps. All these steps, maybe small clubs in the middle of nowhere. Maybe, and if you play an act in the middle of nowhere, not in the middle of America, where there, as Ray pointed out, there's no infection. It's got to be a name artist to get attention. You can't. It has to be somebody with a name that people associate with that's trying it, because it gets more press.
Yep.
Jake, I
So
think
challenge to all the artists. Who wants to be the first person to go in, the first major rock band to play a tour? Let's open up. Who's going to be the first one? Votes are coming in right now, folks.
Jake, to add to what you said about trucks and buses, which I agree, I think for the Rolling Stones and U2 and Garth Brooks and Justin Bieber and those folks, adding another truck or a bus is not a big deal because of where they sit financially. I can tell you, referencing the tours that I'm talking to now that want to go out July or August, they've all said to us, yeah, we're taking less stuff, less sound, less lights, because they want to put more money in their pocket. So in and of itself, I think the mid-level and below shows are going to be much smaller than they were 6 months ago. And it will only be the superstars that still carry the extravagant productions.
And I think the superstars next year will cut back.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be a cutback. I'm sure that Winky and the people at Tate do not want to hear there's going to be a back on production. But I feel that there's going to be a cutback because everybody's going to look at the financial things of like more venue rent for cleaning, which comes out the bottom line. So I think everybody's going to look at it. I don't think anybody's immune to this right now.
Well, I think it comes back to also what can the fan still afford, and us being smarter with money. Where in the past we would spend it easier than in the future. I guess the world is changing, and the world changed already.
At EDC, we're talking about only having a 390-foot wide stage that goes to 450.
But I think people will expect something different too. They'll
be glad to be there.
I think another thing that, and like Rob, I like the aggressive approach. I really do, and I think he's absolutely right. He's seeing that in his ticket sales. People are desperate to go and see live entertainment. I watch the EDC stream a little bit.
Yep.
I watch every night when the show's live, and I walk around and I get a thrill out of the music. I cannot get the same thrill out of the music on a computer and a streaming. And that's the same for rock and roll. I mean, I'm guitar, bass, and drums live. I'm old school. So this new, virtual streaming for me is like a foreign language, So, and I'm too old to move on. So I'm only happy, and the Gulf Shore Festival, one can only hope it's a success. One can only hope that somebody doesn't get sick and spread something like they did in Korea. We hope, we all pray for that, whether we wrote the safety guide, whether we're an agent, whether we're a manager, whether we're a production manager, or a vendor who needs to get his stuff on the road to make some money and keep people in work. We all want it to work. I think we have different approaches how we come at it. Some are more safety conscious, some are more aggressive, and and Michael put it, and there's some more aggressive governors in states that want to bring to it. I'm sorry to go back to NASCAR, but it was the governor of the state of South Carolina, Darlington, South Carolina is, right, Mike?
Yeah.
He said, please come. And then they made all this stuff. And, it's like a tour. They're moving around 200 people. They're moving around 70 or 80 trucks. They're doing live broadcasts, and no people understand they did it right. They will be the first people to get live crowds at a venue. And that is only a plus.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Ray, we've got time for one more question. I know that we wanted to get through more questions, but we're on a time crunch here. So,
really, that's the other three or so I had were really about that people wanted to hear about coming back this year, not 21, and wanted the panel to take up how to play this year. And I would just say in closing that the business is it's going to come back, and it's just a matter of who are going to be the players in it. Because I mean, the industry survived the black. People have been gathering to watch concerts through a whole lot of different plagues and whatever else. The question is, will the current players be around to be the ones that are executed? Because somebody's going to come up with the money for a show, and people are going to go. And it's a matter of will we be able to stage safe these people now who are currently running the business? Will they still be in business to get it done? And if we don't move sometime in the near future, relatively near future, then some of these players won't be around to do it, and others will have to rise up and do it. I'm hoping it's the ones who are currently that know what they're doing and can do shows, because they've taken us pretty far. We talked a lot about the golden era of live music, which we have been in for, since the great slump. It's been like 10 years of climbing up, and what could derail it? Well, we found out what could derail it, and it's been shown not to be a bulletproof business, and it will come back. It's a matter of who's going to do it, and nobody wants to be irresponsible. Nobody wants to get anybody sick, obviously, but I think when I hear things about, we've always been the ones who are going to follow sports, and sports is going to follow a lot of other things.
Yep.
But I think that it's going to happen, and people are really hungry to see shows, as Jake said, and everybody else knows. It's our job to protect them and put them on in the safest possible way. I think as an industry, we're pretty responsible, and we'll do that. And let's just think about the ones who are depending on this to put food on the table, who haven't been able to work for 2 months. And they need it more than these big bands that can sit out indefinitely. And as Rob said, don't tour that much. They'll go a couple of years without touring anyway. But I have confidence in the morals, ethics, and professionalism of this industry. I really do. And I think we're not going to, the very fact that ESA puts together such guidelines and other people are doing similar things, and everybody's working really hard to overcome this. And I know people will go to shows. It's just a matter of will it be us that are doing those shows, and our people will be out there ready to play.
Ray, there's an old expression that I use all the time. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's what we need now more than ever, is positivity. Whatever the future looks like, however we get there, whatever path that it takes, we need to get there with a positive attitude, because if we sit around like Eeyore and oh my gosh, we'll just never get that. You know, we won't get it done. I don't think man ever thought he would set foot on the moon, but he did. You know, Martin Luther King, I had a dream. I mean, who saw those things coming? People achieve magnificent things. You've got to give people hope. And we give them hope by talking 2 weeks at a time and by having a positive attitude. And at some point in the future, we're going to emerge from this.
Yes. And I want to send this over to Jake Beria for his closing thoughts as we go down our list of panelists. Jake?
Well, I think my closing thoughts have all been said here, and everybody here on the panel. I really sincere, hopefully, and soon that I can see some of them, especially Rutger, at a live event with fans and people playing, and you know, and it's down to production, it's down to vendors, it's down to artists, it's down to agents, and it's down to managers. We all have to work together, whether it's responsibly, whether it's financially. We all have to work together to get our great industry back on the road.
I couldn't have said it better. Stuart Ross.
One thing I have is still Monday.
Long course, Stuart.
Thanks. Listen, I hope to see all of you in person. I just ask that everybody be safe. It's not that difficult, and keep your spirits up.
Jim Digby, I would love to hear your thoughts.
No, you sure about that?
Absolutely.
I speaking from an optimistic place, I think it can't be said enough that what our industry continues to do time and time again is exemplify its ability to pivot, to take up new charge, to find solutions, to be the industry that can be anything you want it to be. We are so nimble and so successful at creating solutions. That's what we do. And if you look across our industry, thanks to guys like Michael Strickland and Joey Gallagher, who are picking up their ideas and trying to innovate and trying to find ways for us to be live again, it really is remarkable how special a place we work and live in. I will also add that we are also an incredibly diverse industry. People of all types are welcome here. People of all beliefs are welcome here. And on the next one of these calls, we ought to demonstrate that.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. Well put. All right.
Good point.
Paul Bassman.
Bunch of old white guys.
I knew that.
Let me unmute. Okay, hi. I want to read a quote from Disco Donnie it was a tweet from Disco Donnie that I just love. He said, "Saw a guy last night say no social gatherings till 2022. Well played, Nostradamus Jr. I see your 2022 and raise you to 2025. He's such a character. What a guy. Basically reiterating that we don't know what the future holds. And I really do hope, like Michael said, that we go in with a lot of hope and just pray that this is going to go away, or we will find some medicine in the next 3, 5, 6 months or whenever that will make our industry come back. I am so hopeful and confident that will happen. But if it doesn't, then like Jim said, we'll have to pivot and figure something else out.
And if we get in trouble, then Steve Edelman, you'll help us out, right?
Always. My closing remark is actually exactly what Jim Digby said. I had the same response looking at a bunch of white men with gray hair. I think the next time we have this conversation, we should get some younger, more diverse voices. And let's not be a bunch of old white men again. Thank you, Michael, for that.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, Steve.
No, I mean, look,
It's the alternative.
we are what we are, but we are a diverse industry, and our strength comes from the incredible breadth of things that we do well. So let's not fall so in love with our own voices and our own ideas that we don't hear the other people who are, don't represent big acts or, big parts of the industry, because in terms of just raw numbers, there are a lot more of the smaller ones than there are of us, big cheeses.
Absolutely. Rob, we would, what's your closing statement for this lovely Monday?
I hope I'm going to say this right. Nothing screams more Spinal Tap rock and roll to me than tour isolation. So, yeah, I just say stay positive. You know, there's been a great depression in our industry. You know, from agencies to management companies to production companies to across the board, and the idea that the world the sky is falling, I don't think is true. So just have faith and stay in there. And, you know, you can reach out to any of us, anybody who's looking for help or answers, and maybe we can help guide you in the right path. But, you know, stay the course and just stay positive, because, you know, there's these days of sitting there and saying that, man, I'm bored, are really going to be over. So the idea of saying I'm bored will probably come out of the English dictionary. So.
Okay. Well said. Rutger, last but not least.
It's difficult to add something to what you guys just said, but I agree. We need to stay positive. We should not make a lot of decisions on the stuff we don't know. I think it's very important that we make decisions on stuff we do know, which means that tomorrow we might have a vaccine. We might not. We might, but let's not lose hope.
Yeah.
I still hope that we're going to do a huge event in October, and I'm a positive thinker, and I think we will. Chances are small, but still a chance.
There'll be a vaccine
Fingers are crossed.
for the election, won't there?
Who knows? Again, it can be happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
So let's just stay positive and make decisions.
Yep. Ray, it's your turn for the closing remarks before we wrap this whole thing up.
Well, I mean, I had my closing remarks, and yes, this is I could never put a panel on like this anymore. It is an incredibly diverse industry, and you know, it's also a smart, flexible industry, and I'm very optimistic about the folks who work in this. I'm worried about a lot of people in this business,
yep.
Artists and professionals who work in it, and just hopeful that we can all get together and do a show soon. I'm confident. Soon is a relative term. Soon is not what it used to be. But look, there's a lot of people working really hard on it. I want to thank everybody for joining us and offering your thoughts on it, and I look forward to seeing you at a show soon. Yes. Soon is a relative term. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, and thank you for all tuning in and listening. And I'd love to thank Pollstar again for co-sponsoring and or being the only sponsor. Sorry, and Ray for co-moderating. I'd like to thank RJ Lynn for directing and helping produce this lovely town hall panel, and we will have a different panel next time, I promise you. And if you want to keep in touch, please click that little subscribe button at the bottom. And my name is Patrick Whalen, and thank you again for the live entertainment town hall #2. See you, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.